Welcome to the Soldier Fund podcast, the platform for untold stories from the National Guard Special Forces community. Join us as we delve into the lives of these elite warriors and the journey of our nonprofit, dedicated to supporting their courageous mission to free the oppressed worldwide. I'm your host, Ben Derrick. Let's dive in. Jordan, I think we should keep doing this.
What exactly? Sitting together and hanging out, or doing podcasts?
That's right, doing podcasts, man. I mean, as much as I appreciate our friendship, I just really feel these conversations are doing a lot of good based on the feedback we're receiving from the folks that are listening.
Yeah, and that's not even just internal guys. We even have people outside of the formation commenting.
Yeah.
And so that's really good. A lot of positive feedback.
Comments going crazy on YouTube a little bit, like, hey, help me figure this out. Thank God somebody's talking about this. And, you know, there's also a lot clamoring for those, and this is related to the last episode we released, but family members actually listening in just to get some insight on kind of behind the curtain on the SF culture. This is a great way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my wife would agree that for the majority of my team time, she didn't know a whole lot about what I did or what that looked like. She knew her side and knew what that felt like.
Very
but didn't
familiar,
really, not really sure about my side of things. And this kind of gives us an outlet to discuss it, and I think she even appreciates it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's understandable, right? I mean, you're not talking about everything that's happening on your team. That's just not the way SF works.
That's right.
But when mediums like this, you can talk about general ideas or just give some information out there to the general public, which may be a wife, also may be a potential donor to the nonprofit. We definitely don't ever mind that.
Yeah.
But all of these lines of effort are extremely valid. And today we've brought a guy in, actually a new guy on the HBW team, which is exciting to say.
Yeah, man, I'm really curious as to what he has to say. I'm ready to listen to it. You know,
That's right.
And it's a new thing for us to have a strength and conditioning coach inside Special Forces National Guard.
Yeah, which seems, and there's the key there, like a strength and conditioning coach inside of the National Guard, which having these resources kind of trickle down to this level because they're needed, mostly because of the level of utilization of the National Guard over GWAT, right? We're a little late to this, but we finally arrived.
Yeah, and I mean, it's even got a term like tactical athlete is a thing. So treating our guys like the athletes they are, makes sense to me.
We make that comparison all the time in that, like, these guys are professional athletes, you know, and the guys who are professional athletes that are filling up stadiums have a lot of resources at their disposal.
True.
Not quite that much at the National Guard level, right? But that is changing. And anytime we have a chance to celebrate the National Guard moving around resources to help the dudes, we're absolutely going to do that. More 100%. Of that, right? And it's happening. So Jeff, we're happy you've joined us, man. Not only on the podcast, but also as a part of the team. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I think Jordan, I, and you, we talked about it for like 3 years coming on now. It's good to finally be here.
Yeah, being in those hallway conversations, it's like, I really think this could work, man, and here we are. So a little bit of patience paid off. Well, a lot of patience on your part, right? So I'd love for the people who are tuning in today just to hear a little bit of your backstory. The way we talk about it is, you know, why do you give a damn? You know, everybody's got a story, and we'd love to hear that part of yours, how you got close to this population and decided you wanted to spend the majority of your life helping them.
Yeah, so 2014, I finished my degree in kinesiology. And then I started my career as a strength coach in New Orleans, working in the sports performance world, training anybody from kids to just general population adults. Had some military guys come through. Wasn't super huge, and then quite a few professional athletes. Went on to work at the collegiate level for a little bit. Decided that's not really where I wanted to be. It's a ton of fun, but it's a rough life. And then started my career really took off. I helped open up and start a new strength and conditioning facility in New Orleans. So did that for a while. And then ended up deciding to join the Guard. So I joined the Mississippi Guard in 20th Group, and then that took me to North Carolina. And then that's where I went through SFAS, and then after I came off active duty orders, found my contracting gig up at Fort Bragg. and that's where I spent the last 4 years now.
I bet that was an interesting experience, huh?
Yeah, it was a blast. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
So just for the listeners' sake, like, you're a strength and conditioning guy up at Bragg. What does that look like?
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of going out and earning your business. Just because you're a tactical strength and conditioning coach up there, people think, like they're just going to utilize you all the time.
Yeah, that's the assumption I was making.
Yeah,
really.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
It's not. They don't take advantage of it as much as you think. So it's a lot of leg work. It's a lot of going out, shaking hands, kissing babies, telling people what you can do, what you know, and then how much you care, why it's important to you. And so for me, with military background, it was a little bit easier to make those connections, and then understand why people are hesitant to use anything that the Army provides on its own.
Yeah. Boy, that's a key detail right there, isn't it? Yeah, it's a little bit of skepticism.
Yep.
And so you're out there, man, I didn't know that. I just kind of figured, like, you're propped up at Bragg. There's obviously a large concentration of folks there that could utilize your resources, but there's some skepticism and people stand at a distance, so you're having to hustle in and close that gap.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
I think that's with most people, especially working with our population, you got to be vetted, is what we'll say, And so it does not surprise me at all, even with all the credentialing, that he had to go through a little vetting process there.
Yeah. Well, you have to, I think, this is an underused word for good reason, I guess, but you have to have a love for the population to even be there in the first place. So, like, man, I really, really want you guys to succeed. And I can tell you from the first time we talked to you, we were up at BCO having a conversation, like, man, this guy's really passionate about people's fitness, and especially these people's fitness, right? Yeah. And that's evident from meeting you from day one. So you spent a couple of years in that environment, really honing your skills, probably about how to convince guys to utilize your resources. Yeah, which is ended up being a really vital thing to learn, but it was probably the hard way.
Right. So in the tactical sphere, most people are just, if you don't look the part, you can't walk the walk and talk the talk. They don't care that you're the smartest guy in the room. It doesn't matter. And especially in the SF community, when guys are already fit and they did it on their own. Why do I need you?
Yeah.
Like, I've made it here. Like, I'm doing okay. I'm hurt sometimes. I'm not hurt sometimes. Like, why do I need professional help? I did it on my own.
Yeah. Sound familiar, doesn't it, Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hurt sometimes. I'm not hurt sometimes.
Well, I would change that to I hurt most times to, like, sometimes I feel great. So it's a pendulum swing for me,
Yeah. So you get figured out and then start putting your setting your face to the work, and based on you sitting in this chair here today, it only reaffirmed this is what you're looking to do. You're helping these elite warriors stay elite, become more elite over the long haul. That, to me, feels like kind of summarizes your passion for your work.
Yeah, I love it. So being a strength coach is cool. It's a fun job, but getting to do it for your own battalion, for your guys, the guys that you're going to work with, you're going to go to war with, that's like, it's huge. It's huge for me personally. Yeah.
Oh, it's huge for us.
Yeah.
We stole him. So it's awesome.
Is that how that went?
Yeah, that's exactly how it went.
Is that? I didn't know that. Maybe we should tell that story off mic.
Yeah. Okay. Deal.
Yeah. Deal. So for you, there's a lot of personal investment there, and not to spend too long on this, but I think it's important because I experienced a little bit of the same process when I first started coming around. There was a couple of questions that people asked me, and we didn't get any further than about a year. Who the hell are you, and why are you here? And you answer that question consistently over time. You start producing results, and then the community. I think this is a great part of this community, that they're slow to trust even resources that are being brought their way, because it's a real vetting process and it sifts. And if you survive that process, then you're actually bringing something good to the community. I don't mind it at all. And here you sit. So the conversation we like to have today, kind of breaking it down into a couple of phases, because the part of the formation that's going to click on this episode is looking for some practical guidance and help, and that's what you love to give. Mm-hmm. So as we're talking about training, I think the number one question that Jordan and I have been fielding over the years is, how do I train effectively? Because there's kind of like an army way to train, which is max effort at all times, every day.
Every day.
Yeah, exactly. Heavy as possible, far as possible, that sort of stuff. And then there's this other information coming out of the fitness community that feels a little bit contrary to that. So there's just some confusion, rightfully so. I'd love to have a couple-minute conversation from your perspective. How should SF soldiers be training? That's a broad question, but...
Yeah, that's a $1 million question. And so that's the fun part, right? Is you take a group of guys, and they're generally, especially when they're young in their career, they're high performers, right? Mm-hmm. So whether they came in straight off the streets or they came in from the 82nd, they've, everybody's got to been there, done that kind of attitude. Some guys have come in with some professional help. Most of them haven't. So we talk about, like, what's the best way to train? How do I be effective? Why should I not, go out and run, 5 miles every day, at the same pace, stuff like that. And so that's when we get into, like, well, what are you doing? What are you training for? Like, are you training just not to die? Like, are we going to go run an ultra? Are we going to take the long walk? Stuff like that. Like, what's our main goal? And then how can we take that training, that goal, whatever you have, and then, backdate it? How do we work backwards? Like, we want to do this by this time next year.
Do you find that the guys, when you ask that question, actually have an answer for you, what they're training for?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I mean, the majority of the time, unless they have some kind of school coming up, it's just, I'm doing what I've always done.
Yeah, I'm training to continue to be a Green Beret, right? Yeah, or to be in the unit.
Right. So
but you're asking for something a little more specific from that soldier.
Yeah. And within the community, how you train up for SFAS is monumentally different than how you continue to train once you've made it through your career. But the problem is, and we see this, with our older guys that have been doing this for a long time, they just continue with that same, I got to hit 40 miles a week running, and then another 20 a week in rucking or whatever it is. And you just go till you can't. And that's generally what happens. That's when we start to see those overuse injuries. We have no intention, like purposeful intention behind that training.
Yeah. The overuse injury.
Yeah.
That's a pretty large bucket.
That's just the physical side. We're not even talking about the nervous system being overloaded,
Exactly.
Sympathetic overload of fight or flight. And then we're also training in that manner where we're staying in fight or flight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cortisol levels just maxed out,
Absolutely.
crazy high.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just extrapolate that over 11, 12 years. Then, we're getting into some big problems. So part of what you're doing, it feels to me, is moving in and trying to intercept, or a little earlier, instead of like, oh, well, now that I can't move my right shoulder and I'm experiencing problems doing pull-ups, I'll talk to a guy. You're trying to get in there sooner and say, okay, let's train smarter and harder, but let's not forget the smarter part.
Yeah, so you're saying there's a smarter way.
Right.
We can be way more effective with all of this, right? So coming in, especially if you came from the conventional side of stuff, UPT every morning, 06, 06:30, you're out there, you're running 4 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever it is. Now, especially on the guard side, talking SF, like, we don't have to go out and work out at 6 a.m. We can, but that's not always the best time for every single individual, so hormone levels, talking about cortisol, stuff like that. So it's different in everybody. You might have higher cortisol levels in the morning. You might have another guy might be higher in the evening, and that's going to dictate, like, hey, I don't work out super well at 7 o'clock at night, or I don't work out really well at 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. And that's the good thing, is coming in and being like, well, when do you work out? Why do you work out at that time? It's just what I've always done. Mm-hmm. Is there a better way to do it? Probably.
Yeah. So what do you bring to bear to inform a guy? Because look, I mean, patterns are important for people. You know, if you were to tell me, hey, the best time, the optimum time for you to train is 6 a.m., I'd be like, get out of my office. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you're obviously bringing some information to this, and you've seen over time what's best and what's worst for people, right? So what I hear you saying is you're willing to dive in and individualize these recommendations for soldiers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's Jordan and I's big goal with coming in is, you know, get these guys some programs that, you know, they can jump on and just do, but then look at that individual aspect, like how broken are you not? Mm-hmm. You know, like what can we do within your limitations? Like how do we go about doing that? But the big question is, and I think you use this professionally a lot, is why. Yeah. And a lot of guys don't even know. And it's one of my favorite quotes is, you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of guys, you know, they work out at 6 and they've been doing it so long professionally that now, you know, on the guard side, if you don't have to work out so early, you know, they still do it, and you ask them why. Not that it's big, there's no wrong answer. Yeah. But a lot of them would be like, that's just what I've always done. That's, you know, the status quo.
Now you've got me super curious though, when you're talking about cortisol levels and how do I know that about myself? And now I want to know this. How do I know what is the best time for me? Because I generally personally work out in the mornings. Yeah. I mean, but I have time. I could move that around. How do I know that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to go about that is, I mean, take 2 weeks generally. If you've been working out in the morning, you already know how you feel, you know, during those workouts during the morning. Take 2 weeks and go work out at, you know, noon or, you know, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever your schedule dictates. Do that for 2 to 3 weeks and then compare, especially if you have something like the Whoop, the Oura Ring, Garmin watch. Then you can take that data, and then especially if you're in 2nd Battalion, you can bring it to me. We can sit down and look at it and be like, okay, well, you're a better runner in the morning, but you're a better lifter in the evening, or vice versa, or maybe you're both, you know, better runner and lifter in the morning.
So a lot of it does come down to trial and error, curiosity. Yeah, and some of this, you know, biofeedback that we can get from these very basic devices. Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, the other night, my sleep, I was orange all night.
Yeah.
I was
what was wrong?
I don't know. I had something in my mind was bothering me, that's for sure. Yeah. But I mean, the fact that I knew that, and I felt like crap the next day, obviously. No alcohol consumption the day before, but I'm in high stress. And so you can take that sort of information and say, look, pull up your Garmin app, let's see what's going on.
Yep, absolutely.
And even down to calorie burn, your heart rate variability.
HRV.
We can grab all of this stuff. If you've got a Garmin watch, which I think that's probably 80% of the population, we can just start there. I mean, so much of the physical side of what HPW has been doing has been based on Garmin feedback.
Can you explain what HRV is? Because I get a lot of questions. They're like, oh, my HRV says it's balanced, and they're like, oh no, it's really not balanced. All I know is I drank a lot of alcohol and it messed it up, but I don't know what this means. Supposedly it means I'm fit or not fit, but alcohol throws it off. So what is it?
Yeah, so it's just the variability in your heart rate, right? And so we all have a set number between those beats, the milliseconds between your beats or in your heart rate per minute. And so you have that set time frame, I think, like 30 to 75 milliseconds. I think that sounds right.
Okay.
But so if you're high or low, that's generally when you're taking in too much stress. You know, alcohol will have that.
I'm checking right now as he's describing. Yeah.
Let me see what this thing says right this second.
So it either on one side or the other is an indicator something's going on.
Be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's why it says balanced.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I'm balanced right now in here.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, feeling comfortable doing a podcast?
Mine says 41 ms.
Yeah.
What is milliseconds?
Yeah, I believe that's what it is.
Beats per millisecond, maybe, or something?
So it's the milliseconds between your heartbeat.
Okay. And do you want that number higher or lower, or is it different for everyone?
It's going to be different for everybody. But you want it, generally you'll have, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. You'll have, it's like heart rate zones, right? Like somebody we say zone 2 a lot. I'll try not to get off on a rabbit trail here.
No, we don't mind those at all.
So we say zone 2, right? So if you look at a treadmill, Stairmaster, whatever, zone 2 on that treadmill is going to be like 120 to 140.
Sure.
Well, you're super fit. So like personally, my zone 2 when I go run is up to like 150. Right?
Okay.
So I can be in zone 2 with a heart rate of 150 beats per minute. So my zone 2 is not the same as yours. It's not the same as Ben's. Somebody that's never run before, their zone 2 is going to be like super low.
Okay.
Gotcha. And it goes on for every step. So heart rate variabilities can be kind of the same. And that's the beauty in the Garmins and the Whoops, the Auras, is they can take your information and dictate it specifically to where you're at.
Yeah, and I know it does. I remember mine when I first put it on, did a calibration of like 2 weeks. And then once it had that, I guess it had an average of what mine is, and then it bases my stress level off of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
My 7-day average is at 18 milliseconds. It says it's balanced, but on the low end.
Yeah, see, mine's way above that. So as a Green Beret, I'm better, right?
Yeah.
It's like 41.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to talk about my health stats. Like, let me just say behind Mike, I'm a super fit guy, but Garmin hadn't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
That's how that works. So, but when we dig into stats, this gives you a lot of ability to be able to see what's going on. And I think the larger point we're making here is if you're just doing what you've always done and you're 8 years into your career, probably time to do an assessment.
Yeah.
And if you've been downrange a lot, you've been through GWAT for all these years, and you're trying to hang on to whatever's working for you back in the early days. There's a better way to do this, and it doesn't mean that you're sunsetting on your career. It just means you're taking advantage of all of this technology and all the attention that a strength and conditioning coach can give you to help figure out the data to help you train in a more effective manner.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of easy day, but it's very hard to get people to change their patterns, especially soldiers.
Yeah. So my favorite thing about training guys up pre-selection is a lot of them will actually come to me already having a program, a 12-week pre-SFAS program. I'm like, hell yeah, that's awesome, good. And then I'll be like, where are you on it? And sometimes they're like, well, this is my 3rd time. And they'll just continue recycling that program. I'm like, well, when are you going to SFAS? And they're like, well, next year. And then so they've already completed the same program for 12 iterations. It's only a 12-week program. So it's made to make you peak. And then that guy is generally who we're going to see start to injure themselves, overuse injuries. And we're not talking about just shin splints, but injuries that are going to build up pre-selection. And then when you get there, and then you're under that load, especially during team week, and you can't perform because you're just crushed, because you've been crushing yourself for a peak performance program. So what we say is general population, or general physical preparedness. So general movements, we're getting stronger, we're getting faster. We're not getting super, what we'll call sport specific, selection specific. And so that's how we stay healthy. We develop movement patterns, we develop strength, we develop all 3, energy systems. And then as we go on, we get closer, we get 3 months out, 4 months out from selection. And then that's when you want to take it specific. Now, guys that we're talking like 8 years in, 8 years on the teams, and then they're training, especially active duty side, and you train every day, you train with the same dudes, and you're not utilizing, those, the Thor 3 guys, the HPW programs over there. And then that's when we start to see burnout. We see guys fall off. And it's a disaster, waiting to happen. The big problem is when you get to that 20-year mark, that 15-year mark, you're 35, you're 45, and you're still trying to run with all the 25-year-olds coming out doing their run programs. Like, that's not necessarily, and it could be where you're at, but it's not, it's more times than not where you're at. Hormonally, physically, you don't sleep the same, you don't recover the same. Your central nervous system takes longer to come back down than it did when you were 25 and you were fresh to the teams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Physical injuries on top of that.
Yeah, Jordan, this is kind of I think, probably real close to the core motivator for you, because you've been very open about this, experiencing over the course of your career, like same stimulus, different response physiologically. what's happening here? You know, and you've kind of gone on your own journey to get this figured out.
Oh man, yeah. And what I've seen too, just listening to you talk, is what I did and a lot of team guys around my age in their career did. You get injured and you're like, well, I just won't deadlift anymore. And then next thing you know, I'm like, I just won't back squat anymore. I'll just stay away from that. And next thing you know, it's like, it all hurts. What do I do? And now, you know, now I don't have my outlet that I had to release stress and to look a certain way and feel a certain way. And I'm not sleeping good. Now we have this like layer effect of physical injuries, TBIs. Now I'm not working out the way I wanted to. My diet sucks, like compounding effect.
Yeah.
And I'm just doing it on my own. And the only way I know to do it is to rinse and repeat what I've always done. But I can't really do that to the level I used to could, which is also an emotional thing. Then it's like, I'm not where I used to be.
Yeah.
That's a crappy.
It's a hard spot to be in.
Man, especially for a type A dude who wants to be a top performer. And he's like, I'm not anymore. But maybe he can be, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's hope.
Well, I think, of course, we would definitely say that. But what's coming to bear on this conversation I appreciate so much is there's a couple of different angles here that we can approach. And since we can be so public about this on this podcast, I mean, HPW is open to all of those angles. I don't want anybody to be able to box this program, man. If you need to talk to somebody about the emotional impacts of limited physical ability due to longevity of career, great. Let's talk about that. I'm your guy. If you want somebody to program you to make you the most badass in 14 weeks, I'm not your guy. We have a guy, right? We can have that conversation first. We can have that conversation only. You know, if someone wants to get into the intricacies of team life and family life and all the experiences you've had as an 18 Delta, you're the person they need to be talking to, right? So we're not just a one-trick pony as many would think as HPW, like, oh, well, it's just an emotional thing, you know, or it's just a career thing.
Not.
No, man. I mean, if you're looking as part of HPW to figure out how do I rehabilitate an injury without having to, you know, take it all the way to where it's career ending, or just ignore it to where it's not career ending, but it leads to substance abuse, then probably the first person they need to be talking to is you. And I would imagine we all have very similar conversations. I'm pretty sure that you have a lot of emotionally based conversations.
Absolutely.
At the squat rack, right?
Yeah, all the time. And that's why, you know, now there's three of us, and that's the upside of not just, you know, when Jordan was just doing it by himself, you know, that's a lot of roles to take on as an individual. And then I've said this on, you know, the last team I was on as a strength coach. I have the fun job. I have the cool stuff. I get to be in the gym. I get to see the progression, you know, the healing, stuff like that. And then a lot of the other jobs, cognitive performance, you know, talking to people about recovery and stuff like that, that's not as fun. But it's a lot of times those conversations will start in the gym. And then, you know, I get to ask these dudes, like, you know, if I'm working with you one-on-one, I'm like, well, how do you feel? How'd you sleep last night? Like, what's going on? Like, oh, you're going through a divorce? Yeah. How do you feel about that? And then when those conversations kind of start, I'm like, well, hey, have you ever seen Ben?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, yeah. And then we talk about hormones and stuff like that, and they start asking questions. I'm like, well, hey, have you ever seen Jordan? And so that's when, and same thing with y'all, you know, you're in the office, you're talking to somebody, or you're on the street, and they're like, yeah, I did this and this, and then my shoulder or whatever, and they're like, okay, well, let's get you lined up with Jeff. Like, that's the beauty of having, you know, multi-pronged team where those conversations you don't, you know, and it's the guys Jordan connects with, I might not connect with, the guys you connect with, you know, it might be better. And then that's, you know, you develop that relationship with this guy and then bring me in. Whereas maybe if I and him had started talking, we wouldn't have hit it off so much. Yeah. Right. Because it's all about connections. How do we connect with all these guys?
Agreed.
And with all the personality types out there, we're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, so to speak, you know?
That's a great way to put that.
We can pour a little bit of our own selves in it and bring that connection in and make it stronger to get everybody what exactly it is they need.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think part of the strength of what we got going on right now, no pun intended, is that the main thing that's driving the three of us is to help the soldier.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's it. Like, we don't have to get real complicated about this. Like, if you're one of the SF guys, and I would even expand it out to 19th, like, we have big dreams for this, that HPW would be just a powerhouse program inside of both groups where a soldier knows I'm always supported in at least these 3 or 4 ways this team can bring. And if they can't figure it out, they'll find I mean, I watch Jordan do this on a weekly basis. Like, I don't have a solution sitting on my desk, but by the end of the day, I'll find one for you.
Yeah.
And he does repeatedly. You know, it's something we don't talk about enough on this podcast. But getting back to kind of some intricacies of training, I think a lot of guys are like, okay, well, I have to do things differently, and the how is kind of answered. We talked a little bit about the when. One thing that I'm very curious about for us to talk about behind Mike is, you know, when you have conversations where you're telling a guy, look, we either need to address this or you need to take a knee. How do you handle those tough conversations with guys?
Rarely do I say take a knee. So
man, everybody's gonna love that.
Yeah. There's almost always a workaround, right? So, but it's not always the case. Sometimes, like, it's how do we dial it back? And personally, I've dealt with that since July. You know, I had a lower leg injury that I didn't take a knee for, right? So I ran on it for a year, and then it exacerbated so bad. And then I had to have that conversation with myself. I was like, what am I doing? Am I going to continue on, like, hurt? Mm-hmm. And literally my response to one of my coworkers a few months ago was, well, I'm going to go and it's going to heal or it's going to break. And so we'll find out, right? And so some of those conversations, you know, you have with yourself, you have with other guys, but there's generally a workaround. You know, it's like, how do we not deadlift forever? Okay, well, maybe we don't deadlift. Do we need to? Like, how much longer are we going to be in? Is there, you know, are we going to go on profile for a little bit? Whatever that may be. Yeah. But generally, it's how do we improve that movement? So, you know, if we don't want to do squats at the moment, but we can still do some lower body movements and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's all about, what can I do with you? What can we work around? How do we not say no? We just find an alternate route.
Yeah, that sounds very SF to me.
It does. Yeah. It does.
Yeah, we'll find a way around this. Yeah. But I think the trust that guys can have in you is, we may be, you know, to use a very negative word, we may be scaling this particular movement to these other things. It's with the design to get back to this other deal.
Right, yeah. And so, I mean, you have to look at it in the case of years, right? So, and that's the hardest thing, honestly, to do, because we're so focused on our immediate performance, right? Or I have a PT test coming up in 3 months. Like, I can't afford to not do this right now. It's like, well, you can't afford to not do that right now, right? So it's how do we dial it back? How do we take a step back? You know, how we retrograde and then find that workaround to get back to wherever it may be. So for me, it was the hardest thing was not running and rucking, which is hilarious because I hate it. But so I had to take a step back. I had to quit running and rucking for like 2.5 months. And then so it was, okay, well, I'll hop on the Stairmaster for an hour, whatever. And then it became, maybe I shouldn't be doing that, you know, loading it so much. So then it was just stationary bike, right? It was super fun for a little bit, and then I hated it. And then so some of those things is just, it's accepting that you're going to take a hiatus for those 2 to 3 months, or, you know, shorter or longer, whatever it may be, because in the grand scheme of things, it's going to extend out for years, right? We're going to start running. We'll be able to run for a few more years, so to speak.
Yeah, short term, I don't like this, but it's got a lot of long-term benefits.
Right.
Part of my question for you, Jordan, is hearing this conversation today, how beneficial would this have been for your career to this point?
Oh, man, extremely. If I could back up, and I was thinking that too as you were talking, let's just go back even further.
Okay.
If this was early on in my career and I would have stayed healthier early on and not just powered through, maybe not. I don't know how I would feel today, but as far as implementing that now, yeah, we have the guys that are at that age group and that health genre of dudes that need to like take a knee or tune it back or whatever, but also implementing this to our new team guys and saying, hey, be smarter earlier so that you don't end up like these guys. And that's a really hard thing to convey because they don't feel it. You know, if you don't feel it, if your body's not there, you're like, man, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
However, you're supposed to be the subject matter expert, and our guys need to listen to that, right?
Sure, yeah. There's a difference between cumulative effect and acute injury.
Correct, yeah.
I mean, like, you're on an operation at night, something happens, and you bust your ankle, right? Like you had said earlier. That's a little different than I've just been training, and this is the tough truth, I think we should say. You are injured right now because you've been training incorrectly for 9 years.
Right.
Like, so let's change that. Let's get you better, and then let's change the way that you train, even dialing it into the time of day that you train, which lights off a lot of other things that we've talked about many episodes with operator syndrome and just this cluster of physical effects that come in. Your efforts can limit, in a lot of ways, the physical side of that cluster and operator syndrome just by changing the way that a soldier trains.
Yep.
I think it's important that we say today, though, because you said this in the office a couple of days ago, you don't want to make them lesser of a soldier. You want to make them an even better SF guy, right? It's not. We're not trying to dial you back so you're just less intense. There's a goal of making sure that they can soldier better for longer,
right?
And you've got a track record of doing that.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're on a team, the goal is to stay on the team, right? Like you don't ever want to get off of that team, and you want to be there for as many years as you're in. And so it's taking those younger guys and being like, hey, you have an awesome work ethic. You train 7 days a week and you're fine. And that's great. But can we do the same? Can we get the same results out of 5 days a week and then take 2 of those days and go do something different? Maybe not go for a run, go for a paddleboard for 2 hours or whatever. And then bring that central nervous system down, because you're already super high if we're working out at 6 a.m. That CNS is spiked, and then you go to work, you know, if you're training all day, and then it stays up, you know, and you might come down for a little bit. But so it's like, how do we take advantage? And this is what you do a lot of. It's like those minutes that you get in between, you know, phases of training and stuff. How do we bring our central nervous system down a little bit? Yeah.
Let's admit, though, even in this conversation, to certain guys, that's going to sound like a really soft skill that's bullshit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you know, that's just, pardon the language, I guess. I don't know if I have to say that on this podcast, but it is scientific that if we are switched on, and we were in a conversation group over 2 years ago, where they're having studies that are showing that some guys are switched on in the course and they haven't switched off in 2.5 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, so if we're talking to you about, hey, can you get the same effects from 5 days of training as you would from 7, that's real. Because you're allowing your body to experience that reset, as you're referencing, coming back down into a window where you're not in fight or flight, you know, and you're not having to have that second and third bourbon just to go to sleep because you're so keyed up.
Right.
What we're saying is sometimes the soldier's doing that to themselves.
Absolutely.
And you're willing to turn the dials on a couple of things with them because you know them enough about them to make these calls, even through reaching into their lives and their training through an app, which is pretty exciting that we're able to use that these days.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, you've been working pretty hard on that since boots on the ground. But I think that medium will be there for the long term. Right now, it's an app called Bridge Athletic that you're putting this stuff in. So for the guys that are inside the community that are like, how do I get in touch with this guy? You know, that's going to be a big part of this moving forward, that you're on the back end of that system and can really tailor a lot of this stuff based on their objective.
Yeah, so I still have a good bit to learn about Bridge, but the cool thing for me and the cool thing for all of our guys is I can push programs and adjust them immediately, right? So I give you a program and you're running 3 days a week and you're like, hey, I don't want to run 3 days a week anymore for whatever reason. It's down. We're like, okay, that's a good idea. I can immediately go in there and change that. And I can also get a lot of feedback from it, right? So you can go in, and we can start off with the pre-session questionnaire through the app. How'd you sleep last night? How do you feel? Do you feel sore? Do you feel recovered? How's your stress level? And it's all like 1 to 10 kind of answers that you get to fill out. So you do that for several weeks, and then I get to sit there and look at it. And then I get to look at, your run times when you record them, your lifts, your weights, all that good stuff. So I get to see the back end, like how's our performance doing? Okay, we've been at this program for 6 weeks. We're starting to peak. And then week 7, you start dying off a little bit. Those runs are getting a little lower. Heart rate's getting a lot higher for the same work effort, stuff like that. And then I can sit down and be like, all right, we were taking it up a notch. It was a little too aggressive. We're gonna dial it back a little bit, and then on week 8 we're gonna come back or week 9 come back and crush it again.
Man, that is very specific attention.
Yeah. It is.
I can't wait for this, but I do want to be devil's advocate if we can, just for the last couple of minutes. What are the objections? What would be the objections? I'd like to address those. I think we talked about them a little bit, I don't know that I trust it. Surely over the past 40 minutes, we've debunked that. But what are some objections of soldiers using this resource?
Me or Bridge Athletic?
Yeah, you, yeah. Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to fight about apps till the end of time, right? Yeah.
So I think number one is, and this is, being inside the military, I know you've heard it now, military grade. So anything that the Army gives you, you really don't want. Like, you want to go out and get your own.
Off the shelf.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
The other big thing is shiny object syndrome. And this kind of goes back to, being intentional with your training is, hey, my battalion's got this new strength coach, but he doesn't have any followers on Instagram. They're like his only friends and family.
You can't be serious.
Like,
is that real?
Oh yeah.
Do you not have an Instagram now that you bring it? Are you telling us you don't have any followers?
Is that what you're trying to say?
I don't have 5,000 followers or 100,000 followers. Yeah, but so it's
we could probably make that happen.
Yeah. So then that's the big thing with social media now, right? Is I don't do that kind of stuff. And then you go on social media, especially with the younger guys that grew up with Snapchat or Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. And so they see all of these influencers, and some of them, there's some guys out there doing really legitimate work and really good stuff. But there's more garbage than anything.
Yeah. Even in the tactical space?
Oh, especially in the tactical space.
Wow.
Anybody that's had a tab ever, comes out, and some of these guys have great programs, but some of them are just like balls to the wall 7 days a week. And then that's what some of these dudes want to do.
That's a genre, isn't it? Now that you're bringing it up, like, without mentioning names, there are a couple of guys out there that are like, unless your toenails are falling off, you're not running enough. It's like that chapter 1 kind of thing.
Hard.
There you go. So there's a little bit of combating that. That's interesting you brought that up, because I never would have thought about it. But
I think the biggest obstacle for me personally coming in to an unfilled slot, which is also good, so it's a pro and a con, is guys don't know me, they don't trust my background, but then I get to go out, to our outstations and build those relationships. And then I get to see them, they get to spend time with me in the gym. Unfortunately, not as much time as I think everybody would like, but it'll happen, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like a challenge / opportunity to show them, like, hey, this is what I do. This is why I do it. This is how I do it. And then to take the feedback I get from all of them, and then to be like, okay, how can I change myself? And then so now, like, you as a soldier, like you as one of my guys, get to see not only am I not full of BS, like you get to watch myself change as a strength coach as I watch you change, as one of my guys.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, man. Well, this conversation is maybe even more fired up that you're here because it's going to meet such a huge need.
Absolutely.
You know, it feels like pretty soon you may need to replicate yourself.
Yeah.
You know, that may be the problem.
That'd be ideal. That'd be a good problem to have.
Absolutely.
We'll take it when we get it.
Taking this thing to scale. Well, I mean, it just answers so many things at the heart of, you know, and you mentioned it earlier, Jordan. I think I'd like to loop back to it before we close out today. When a top performer is struggling performing, that causes a whole bunch of issues.
Absolutely.
And those issues are understandable, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree, man. And I think we have the team for it now. You know, we can work with it cognitively. We can reach out and work with injuries, and we can say, hey, you don't have to just quit doing those movements. Yeah. We'll just find a smarter way to do those movements and keep you engaged, keep you in the fight until you're back 100%.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, we're glad you're here, man. Glad to have you around.
I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to the Soldier Fund podcast. If you're inspired by the stories of these elite citizen warriors and want to support their mission, visit us at thesoldierfund.org. Your contributions help us to continue to back the Special Forces soldiers of the National Guard as they fight around the world. Until next time, stay committed to stand with those who serve.